أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. With God's name, the merciful benefactor, the merciful redeemer. The praise belongs to God, the Lord of our systems of knowledge, the merciful benefactor, the merciful redeemer, the sole judge on the day of judgment. We worship you only, we turn to you begging assistance. Guide us on the straight way of those on whom you have bestowed your blessings, not those who incur your wrath, nor those who go astray. Amen.
Ameen. Assalamu alaikum, dear community, with God's name, the merciful benefactor, the merciful redeemer. This is a great honor to have, to be in all of your presence again this week. I'm grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He has given us all another day, another chance to make a difference in life. So I want to get started. This topic is so dear to my heart, the history, so dear to many of our hearts. And it is an honor to our pioneers who are still living, who often feel forgotten. And I want them to know on Study al-Islam that we have not forgotten them, and we are forever grateful for those who are still around, and we are walking in their footsteps. So I want to just say that we don't read bios on Study al-Islam. And but for the sake of those of you who may not know Imam Abdul Aleem, I've asked him if he could just briefly give us some details or some facts of what he was doing, what his role was during the transition from the Nation of Islam to Imam Mohammed. Now, before he answers that, I do want you to know that he's been invited back for 2 more sessions. So he will be, this is part 1 of the history, and a reminder to us that Imam Mohammed, may he be in the highest place in paradise, said that Allah intervened on our behalf. And we need to understand what that means. What does it mean when he says that God intervened on our behalf? And one of the ways for us to understand that is to understand what the circumstances were that we came into the Nation of Islam and we moved from a hybrid form of Islam to the practice of universal al-Islam. And Brother Imam Abdul Aleem, I've said enough. So I welcome you again to Study al-Islam, and I ask you to just briefly give us some details. And for the audience, we will have Q&A after his presentation.
Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum. Before I, excuse me, before I get started, I see Brother George and Sister Diane. George, remember me as Brother Harmon X out of Temple number 7. And Sister Diana, your husband, may Allah be pleased with him and grant him the highest station in paradise. He was my lieutenant. I was the brother who, George, remember me going to, of all places, Holy Cross College. And so when I was invited to do this, I was really thankful because I have been traveling and moving about a lot prior to the passing of our Imam. And so to come back here and to be on this program is really an honor. I really thank Sister Fitra and the people who put this on, because you have no idea as the influence that it has around the world. And I want to say that for me, understanding how much in history we bring to the world of Islam. And I'm hoping to try to tie all that in here, because as a young man, I spent a lot of time studying Islam, and I wrote my first 5-volume set on the Quran. And as Brother George knew, I was one of the early students of Malcolm X secretary, Maceo Aziz. So I studied Quranic Arabic back in the late 60s, early 70s. So once I did teach it, Honorable Muhammad passed, I was one of the few brothers in our community that knew how to pray, how to read the Quran in Arabic. And so I feel honored that to have this opportunity because I like Sister Fitra. I say to myself, a lot of our believers don't know the significance of our presence in the world of humanity. All right, and that's what I want to share with you today. Because if you understand all of the events that was happening around the world, not just in our local, because see, I was a young man living in New York when Minister Malcolm was assassinated. That was 65. 10 years later, Honorable Elijah Muhammad passed away. That was 75. But there are a lot of things that happened during that time that people don't always know that are now, well, what I'm going to talk about is the convergence of trends in the world and where we sit in that trend. And inshallah, so for me, I had opportunity to, in the early part of our mission, to go overseas and study in Saudi Arabia. I had opportunity to travel extensively, and it's been a marvelous time. That, and I also had the opportunity. The Imam asked me, sent me with Imam Minister Shabazz to come to Philadelphia because at that time Minister Shabazz was the regional director of both regional minister, of both New York and Philadelphia. So I was asked to come. So I had to leave New York. Believe it, they probably wonder what happened to me, but I came to New York with the purpose of establishing a masjid that was not, had never been a temple, never been a satellite. And in fact, when you come to Philadelphia, inshallah, next month, the building that you're in is the work that we was involved with, and it's very important for you to know that the believers who joined me in developing that masjid from we used to meet in each other's houses. We used to meet at the Masonic Temple. Well, that masjid that didn't exist in 1975. Believers from the time of Imam Mohammed, 1958, they joined with us, and we went from nothing to the edifice you will see those of you who go to Philadelphia for the 50th anniversary. You'll see the works if you follow the language and direction, and you respect those who laid the foundation. I'm going to talk about that today, inshallah, the bedrock, because people who knew no Quran, they knew no Arabic, but they had faith in the Word of God. All right, they are the ones who were and still are those who are remaining. Many of them have passed. They were our strongest believers. And inshallah, today I want to share some things just to start off our conversation. But yes, we have been in this work, and up until recently, we have passed the baton now to my two daughters. They travel with me to places like Morocco, Saudi Arabia, UAE, carrying the message that we are people that we say we are born for a mission. Then what is the mission?
Yes.
We have to understand that you can't be for a mission and say you believe in God and you try to follow somebody else. You're not going to make it. Anyway, let me get started. I'll cover all this in my discussion.
Yes, thank you.
Alrighty.
Take your time, Brother Aleem.
Okay. The topic that I'm looking at was titled "The Legacy of Imam Muhammad," and that I want to discuss with you what is the movement of history that produced Imam Muhammad. You got to understand what were the things that were happening around the world, because he said in his first address was that he was born for the mission.
Mm.
He was born for the mission. What's the mission? All right. And once we understand what the mission is, you have a better understanding of what the Honorable Muhammad used to teach us, that the God intervened. All right. Now, I know people that have the issue with whether or not Allah came in the person of man. No, we're not talking about that. We're talking about Allah, the creator of the heavens and the earth. He was interested in people who were reduced to less than zero. And so if you have faith in the plan of God, you got to know what it is and know what all of the other variables that are happening around the world that makes this plan work. And even now, I see many scholars are saying that the fact that we are now the strongest Islamic movement in the world, standing on Quran and Sunnah, is a miracle. Miracle means something that if we look at all of the odds, all of the improbable situations, to have us here today, I hear the brother lead the prayer. As the sister mentioned, I remember when we used to have, we call them ministers class at that time. I would go from New York to Philadelphia, and I would have the ministers, and I was teaching them to pray. All right, I was teaching them how to read Quran, because we had the Quran, we didn't read it before 1975. But one thing the Honorable Elijah Muhammad did was he prepared us to respect the Quran. And some brothers, myself being one of them, was interested in how to read the Quran. And Minister Larry Ford, excuse me, and other brothers, they encouraged me, because I was not one of the ones who followed the standard in terms of not studying the Quran, not touching the Quran. And that's when I did that 5-volume, every word in the Quran, over a period of like 2 years. I think it took me 2 or 3 years. But anyway, so this miracle, I want to talk about this today, inshallah. I don't want. All right, the miracle. What is the miracle? All right, the fact that we're here today, that studies al-Islam, is a miracle. People who had no other choice but to accept to be Christians coming out of slavery, all right, are now some of the leading Muslims in the world. Invited to all of the major Islamic conferences because we stay true to the directional language of Imam Mohammed that is built on the foundation of his father. See, what many of us don't realize, that if you go back 100 years to 1925, the Islamic world, the Islamic civilization, the Caliphate, was once headquartered in Turkey, was dissolved. It was split up into what we call nation states, and it became, colonized and neo-colonized. Everybody should know what that means, all right? And what used to be the Ummah became different Islamic states ran by dictators, family rule, military rule, all right? So if you think about that condition, so you got to understand, if you think about that condition, there's no way we could point to Islam as our salvation. Not in that state, because Islam in that state was worse than what we had experienced. What I mean by worse, we didn't know our history. We didn't know what we was going through in the 30s and the 40s and the 50s. Here were people who had the Quran, they had the Sunnah, they had the books of fiqh and usul al-din, all Islamic literature, the classical things. And these people got colonized with these things. Keep that in mind. So when you see people running to we want to get true Islam, where was it at in 1925, 1930? Islam as a civilization was brought to its knees by Western philosophical thought and Christian philosophy. You can understand that. So this whole idea, I don't know if I got time to do this in this session, but I want to, inshallah, Islam in India. There was no Pakistan. The Muslim there were colonized. The Muslim Egypt was colonized. The Muslim Saudi Arabia was colonized. The education was dictated by the colonial rulers. So when even Deputy Farad, he suffered the same thing we suffered. He was discriminated against. He was blackballed, whole 9 yards. So we got to understand where we are in history, where we are. These global trends of people trying to find their way back. All right. All right. These trends, as what I'm referring to now as the nexus. A nexus is where events are happening that seem to be disjointed, but at some point they all come together. And then you can see what was going on, not just in your mosque or your city or your state, whatever. I mean, what's going on around the world. These global trends you can see in the 30s, in the 40s, in the 50s and 60s. I think Saudi Arabia got their independence in 62, I think. Egypt got theirs in 59. So look what we was up against. Look what we was up against in 1925. There's no caliphate. 1930, no caliphate. No, the Islamic states are all being ruled by, I say again, dictators, family rule, royal families. All right. So when you understand that you have these different movements that are happening, they're movements of liberation. Africa completely colonized. In fact, Africa was colonized, as some of you may know, some of you students of history know, that in the Berlin Conference of 1885 and 86, 85 and 87, excuse me, that 2-year period, they divided up the Muslims, not just the Muslims, but the Africans. And at that time, there were no African Americans. Keep that in mind. African Americans is a new phenomenon. In this global trend, African Americans, it was part of the liberation movement and understanding of Islam. The closest we got to Islam was with one Timothy Drew, known later as Noble Drew Ali. All right, and his movement didn't work. Excuse me. The next movement that made impact on African American community was the Nation of Islam, led by one Elijah Muhammad, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And we know that history of W. Farad, and we know the whole idea of prototypical Islam. We'll talk about that for a minute. But how can you point people to Islam as a world movement or as a freedom movement when it itself is being dominated? So people who don't understand the prototypical Islamic thing, the Nation of Islam, they're not looking at the condition under which it was seeking to be established. You couldn't really point to it called Orthodox Islam, conquered. You couldn't point to Shiite, conquered. The Ahmadiyya, conquered. All right? So in this environment now, you have a situation where American slavery had produced a people to a state, what I'm referring to as less than zero. All right, now let me explain that. If you go back to 1619, all right, and that date going to be important. Remember, 1619 is the beginning of a chattel slavery in America. And it went until actually 2019, even though a lot of the chains were broken, but it wasn't fully broken until the civilization came to a halt in actually 2020, actually 2019, but what you call it, COVID-19, that was the end of the 400-year period that was predicted in Scripture, because Allah has a plan. Now, coming out of that situation, here were the people who had gone through, you got to understand what we went through. Who were people who was brought on a ship for 3 to 6 months, laying in their own waste, and women being abused, and people. In fact, and one of the scholars wrote how the people who were on those slave ships, that they would rape the women, and in that 6-month period, if they had a baby, they'd throw the baby overboard. And that's something. So coming out of that experience, you got to understand, look at how the self is being destroyed, and the people come out and they choose as their religion. They couldn't go back to Islam because they didn't know. 40 years is a long time to be separated from a cultural life. But they didn't have a choice. The only choice they could make was to be Christian. All right? But I say again, I just want to remind you now, I just want to keep reminding you, Allah has a plan. Allah has a plan, and Allah made a promise. all right? And we had, I mentioned before how the nation, how the Black nationalist movement, you have two choices: to be a Christian or be a Christian who's a Black nationalist. You're still a Christian now. Out of that, those conditions and this convergence. Now, this convergence is the Nation of Islam, as what we say, prototypical Islamic belief system. But it did something that it took people who knew no Quran, knew no Arabic, knew nothing about Hadith, or knew nothing about the fiqh or the usul al-din, all of the classical Islamic language. They knew nothing about that. But they had one thing they did have, right? And I got tested because the believers in Philadelphia that I became the leader of for over 20 years, they became the bedrock. They were people of faith. They were people of commitment. They were, as my daughters always remind me, they were born for the mission. And they are the inheritors of that spirit necessary to establish Islam in America. The bedrock. When I say bedrock, I'm talking about those people who, I have to say again, who knew nothing about, in fact, they didn't know nothing about Islam. All they knew was Christian thought, and that was, they just regurgitated what they heard in the church. They had no choice in the matter. But here's a group that was willing to follow their most sincere urges, all right, and follow a man who was given a responsibility to help lay the foundation. All right. Now here's another date I want you to remember. Here's another date. 1965. The American government passed the civil rights legislation and opened, if you look in the fine print, you find that it opened the door for Muslims in certain parts of the world to immigrate to America. It's a very important date. Why? Why that's important? Because the bedrock, the hard stuff is gone already. Hard work is already done. On the street corners, those believers from New York know what I'm talking about. We used to do a lot of street preaching. They don't do it today. Y'all don't, there's not much dawah going on now, except for study al-Islam. A lot of people don't do nothing. They think it just be a Muslim and just walk around with dress. Oh, I'm getting off my topic. But the bedrock, you can build the Islamic community if you got people who believe and willing to do something that we don't do much, again, too. We don't put our money where our mouth is. We talk a good talk, but people don't give like they believe that they have a divine mission. I mean, how would it be that? But anyway, so this bedrock is people who believe, as the Prophet, President, peace be upon him, said that. He said, "I wish I could see my brothers." And believe, and the Sahaba says, "Aren't we your brothers?" He said, "No, my brothers are those who believe in me but have never seen me." All right. When we come to Islam proper now, we brought the same spirit. All right. And that spirit is that of a bedrock, people who are solid in their commitment. They're willing to do the work. You don't have to ask them to come out. They come out on time. They come out. All right. Those are the brothers and sisters of Prophet Muhammad Islam. Those who believe enough to put all they got on the line. You know, they got all they, so I'm saying this because a lot of our children today, I was telling, they don't understand that they are born for the mission. And praise be to Allah, I always remind my children, I say, you're born for the mission. You're born for the mission. In fact, and they didn't always understand it. And let me, like a little sidebar, let me give a little sidebar. This past Ramadan, my oldest daughter was at a conference of all of the Islamic scholars in Mecca. And she texted me and said, "Abba, the scholars from everywhere." And there was like 25 women out of 1,500 men, all these sheikhs and everybody. I said, well, I said, that's the mission. The mission is to show them that, see, unlike other Muslims, our women help us carry the mission. They're educated, they're prepared. You think about this. This is a sidebar. I know I told you, first of all, I wouldn't go too much on sidebar, but think about how many massages in our association. where the women are the main workers. Even things like Saudi al-Islam, Sister Fishman, she, you know, if she had another life, she wouldn't be Sister Fitcher. But Allah want her to be Sister Fitcher. Help move this down. I mean, there's other times for you to do the other things. Right now, we got a problem of getting this mission going. So the bedrock, if you're the bedrock, you are the foundation. And let's say again, and these things, all this is helping to remove that situation of the less than zero. All right, you understand what that means, people? If you're the bedrock, you may not be noticed. You don't think about the bedrock in the building you're in, the house you're in. You don't remember that. But Allah rewards us. And why that's so important. We say, La ilaha illallah, Muhammad Rasulullah. That's our creed. But we want the acknowledgement of people, but they can't reward us from what we lost. Right? What we lost, our children must know that they are the next level. You won't find this in Africa and Asia. So no, look, if we celebrating 50 years, that means we've only had 50 years of the proper teaching, but we really got 100 years, about 100 years now. And if you know the history of Islam, it tells you that Allah brings about a change, and Imam was talking about this, the Mujahid, every 100 years. But you can't get the benefit of that 100 years if you cut off half of it. You don't know what happened 50 years before your 50 years. All right? I'm just about done. I have a couple things more I want to deal with, a couple more things. All right? We have what we call, in this last 50 years, we call it the second resurrection. All right? The second resurrection is brought about when we move from esoteric language to clear language environment that enable us now to take the Quran, take the Hadiths, and bring them into human language. Why is that so important? I said before, I want to go back, I want to just remind you, I said before that in 1925, the Islamic Ummah was dissolved as a political institution. The spiritual institution continued on. That's always we say, there are 2 million Muslims in the world, but yet we can't stop the genocide of Muslims in the occupied lands. So something is wrong. From 1975 to 2008, Imam Mohammed worked tirelessly to establish a language environment which was missing in the life of religion all over the world. People could read the Quran. They had Arabic. They never not have Arabic. People could read the Hadiths. We've had scholars. I'm telling you, I remember I was with the Imam during the Gulf War, and they had, was the Gulf War? Right after that, a couple of times. They had a thing called jihad, the meaning of jihad. Someone had a conference on that, and all these scholars from all over. So even this recent scholar that my conference my daughter went to, the call was for the Muslims of different schools of thought to meet and discuss ways that we can come together. Why is that so important? We now have the ability, because of the works of the Imam Mohammed and those who support him, to establish a language environment where we can read the Quran and it makes sense. Muslims have never stopped being hafiz of Quran. They have always been able to recite the whole book. We have several million hafiz around the world, but we're unable to apply the great philosophical teachings because we only had scripturalistic Islam. So here we have today, and I tell you again, that's why this is so important, what you're doing. And I just want to say, and we got our children. I will say this, and then I want to conclude so I can take your questions. The establishment of this new language environment had already been tested. What I mean by that is this. The language environment we had prior to 1975 and the language we had prior to 1930 was that of Christian philosophical thought. Our interpretive reasoning was based on Christian imagery. Let me give you, for example. You didn't have to tell the people, African Americans, that God was a man. They already was told that. What do you think Jesus was? So you had to tell the African American community at that time that they were people who were special because they've been told that all along. What we had to do was correct the misconceptions and take God out of physical form. And whether it says, some of the Christian scholars say, God became man so that man would know that he's God. That's in the higher theology, that's what it teaches them. Imam Mohammed comes, and those of us who followed him, I'm talking about not just follow him as a personality, but who studied what he was saying and looked at the world of humanity and see how this problem has come about, and now we have the responsibility to correct it. And we know, as I begin this discussion with you, the caliphate was dissolved, but our generation, I'm talking to the young people now, you are to follow the directional language that we have now that gives scriptural insight to religion. And in order to achieve that, you must know what your role is and continue this process, because the Khalifa is the one who comes after. And if you leave this path, you only invite on yourself the curse of Allah, because Allah has prepared you. Because from the Middle Passage on the ships to the slave plantations, all things you went through were to prepare you to carry this mission forward. So now Islam, don't let people come now and try to impress you with the ability to recite the Quran or the ability to say Arabic. All that was here. But it could not stand up against Christian philosophical thought. The only thing that could really challenge that, and though I want to speak not to the pioneers, you knew that you could argue with people. This was funny. Now, it's funny, but it's not funny. You can argue with people on the old teaching. I use that term, and win. That was so amazing, all right? And when we look at that and look at the tools that we have now from the Imam, old buddy, you ain't seen nothing yet, but you gotta be committed. You gotta be committed to continue to work, continue to follow the directional language. As I travel around the country, I'm gonna say this, then I'm gonna conclude. I see so many massages where the young people have left looking for something else. And they already got it. They should be sitting with the pioneers and make sure they have the right spirit, because we are the bedrock community. So I want to conclude with that. And now, inshallah, open for questions. I got a lot more I want to talk about, but Sister Fisher has given me the blessing of being able to do this more than maybe, inshallah, next month.
Brother Imam, Aleem, it is our blessing to have you here. So I want to emphasize the point. First of all, I want to say thank you so much. I know that you are touching the hearts, and I'm really concerned about our pioneers who feel that they have been forgotten, the work that they have done.
Mm.
And your being here, really, I want to emphasize, is a contribution and an honor and an acknowledgement of those who have gone before us or who are still here, like yourself, like George Khaldun, like many others on this line that I may not be recognizing, Imam Omar, just all of you know who you are, so know that we recognize that. But I want to make a point here, and then we are going to open for Q&A. So we know that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, may he be in the highest place in paradise, didn't know the Quran. So this topic is on that the belief that Imam Mohammed had about that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala intervened on our behalf, the same as he intervened on the behalf of Moses' people. He often talked about that. And what does that mean? So we know that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad did not know Islam as we know it today. But what we do know is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed the Honorable Elijah Muhammad to know his people and to have a cure for what you described, not in detail, but we all know about the history of slavery and what it did to us, what it raped us of. We can go over it again. I'm never tired of hearing it because we don't ever want to forget our history. But I gotta emphasize the point of us not being colonized. Because what is so important about us not being colonized, one of the greatest protections that Allah saved us from was not being colonized. This permitted the leadership to separate us from those who were colonized and give us a sense of confidence and self-awareness and self-evidence that God had brought us along on this journey. So I need to make sure that if we don't, that is so important, that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad kept us from being a colonized people, and he only was able to do that by the permission of God. It don't happen any other way. Look how many leaders we have around right now who can't get 10 people to follow them. You know, and this man.
And something on that.
Sure, go ahead.
What we have to understand is that when we say that Allah intervened, we didn't understand how, and that's why I try to show the global picture.
Yes.
See, as we were struggling with our self-concepts, so were the Muslims. So we couldn't go to them for any help because they were in a worse shape than we were. Because, see, we didn't know what happened to us. They were wide, they were fully conscious. Think about it now. We've had to go back and study ancient books and history to find out how we get it, what happened. They had all the information and
That's
still
right.
colonized.
Yes.
So it's very important for us to understand that. So, for example, I'm going to share this. Back in the late 60s, when I really started studying the Quran, I think there was maybe 2 translations of the Quran, Yusuf Ali and Maulana Muhammad Ali. But there was no concordance. There was no book. If you wanted to study the Quran by knowing what is that, I took that upon myself to do. Because one of the things that we learned was the basics of our whole system as Muslims in America is do for self. Now, in the Quranic Arabic is ijtihad, independent thinking when there's no solution for the problem you have. Understand what I'm saying? All right. No solution for the problem you have. So where do you go for the answers? All right? You got to turn to God.
That's right.
See what I'm saying? You can't turn. Look, they had a worse problem than us. They got the Quran, they got the Hadith, they got the books of fiqh and Usul al-Din and Tafsir, but they conquered. Here we are with nothing but faith in an individual, willing to put our lives on the line in the greatest empire, American empire, in the history of man.
I mean,
you got to understand what I said again. You got to, inshallah, in future lectures, I'll go deeper into this, but you got to understand that we come from an environment where if God don't do it for us, nobody else could.
Nobody did do it for us.
No, they couldn't.
No one.
No one. You got to understand you got to understand the conditions that, and it gets even more. Inshallah, next time we talk about how Imam Mohammed comes about. All right. I'll give you for example.
Mhm.
Okay, I'm sorry. No, I'll wait. Because there's so much we got to unpackage. Because see, like I told you before, we haven't really spent time reflecting on
That's right.
what produced us. Because as say again, prior to 1619, there's no African American, right? Well, we're a product of somebody else's brainwashing. I use that term. But prior to 1930, there's no Nation of Islam.
Brother Imam, we are not going to rush through this. We have some hands up, but I have
Okay,
to.
I'm sorry.
No. I have to share with you what Imam Qasim, may he be in the highest place in paradise, shared with me one time. He said they were all in a meeting, and Imam Mohammed asked the question of the imams that were in the meeting, what is the problem with the Muslim world? And Imam Qasim said he was excited, and he responded.
I remember that meeting too.
They don't know the Quran. And the Imam said, no, that is not the answer. They are not following the prophet. They are not following our prophet, peace be upon him. And so it is a man that God sends to us, and God sent to us the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. So, okay, so we're going to open for questions, and Brother Imam, out of due respect for George Khaldoon being on the line, because I really am honored to have him here. I want him to know that he could take himself off of mute and make comments, because I know that both you and he come from the same era, and I really would like to hear any comments that he'd like to make. But we're going to start with Michael Hamid. And I'm going to remind everybody, ask your question only.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Thank you so much. My question has to do with the evolving of our leadership. Your thoughts in terms of institutional leadership of men. Thank you.
But those what kind of leadership?
What's your question, Michael?
Imam Mohammed Abdul Aleem's thoughts in terms of the transition from Imam leadership to institutional leadership.
Well, okay, I got you. Well, let me say this is that we went through like 2 stages already. The first stage was religious leadership. That's a form of dictatorship, which is with Honorable Elijah Muhammad. You never questioned what he did or what he said. And then we come to Imam, Deputy Muhammad. He has that responsibility, but he knows that for Islam to grow in America, you have to have shura, you have to have mutual consultation, right? So, and he said one time, he says, leadership is with the productive people, resourceful people. And I mentioned it, I kind of alluded to it even today, you know, how a lot of our institutions now are actually ran by our sisters because they're better qualified. The symbolic role, I say symbolic role is of Imam is given to the male, that's true. But leadership can be given to male or female. Our community, and that's why I said we got to be careful if we try to model our community at the colonized Muslim communities of the world. I'll give you, for example, if you read, I'm gonna quote some books here because I think people need to read more. If you read the history of Prophet Muhammad Islam, especially the book entitled Muhammad the World Changer, and it talks about the women who were important leading up to the establishment of Islamic education. The first leader of the Imam was a woman. The best student of Prophet Muhammad Islam was a woman. Our community, we still got issues with giving leadership. I'm not talking about imamship, that's separate. But leadership in the community should be given to those individuals who are best qualified. All right? That's the first thing. Also, we should be able to let leadership transfer. What I'm saying is, like, I mentioned how I was the imam for 20 years at the masjid that, inshallah, those who come to Philadelphia. But after a while, the believers, they had gotten to a point, I got to a point, so the baton got passed. All right? I didn't stop being an imam in the sense of teaching. My goal was to get to the point where our community will have an imam, but also have a board. The board handled the administration, And the Imam is responsible for bringing the believers step by step into more and more Quranic knowledge, so that each individual can be able to self-govern. We kind of stuck right now because we're in a period of transition. You know, some imams don't want to give up the position. Some communities don't. They think the imam is like baby Jesus, God in the flesh. No. You got to come to the point where you have independent thinking that agrees with the general directional language. That's the problem we have now. There's not enough of us insisting in our community stick with the commentary of Imam Mohammed, because for us to get to the goal, the leadership got to come from all the believers. Don't just sit there you just sit there and take it. You got to say, no, brother, you know, because we are mesmerized. We think leadership is one who can speak the best Arabic. That's not the case. I tell you before, the whole Muslim world had Arabic and they got conquered. You want people who to lead you in the direction that you're going.
Brother Imam, we're gonna move on to the next question.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's important.
Time, and I don't want to rush you, but I do want you to be mindful.
I'm gonna get more questions. I see there's quite a number of hands.
Abdul Shakur, can you please take yourself off of mute? And yes, please just ask a question.
Yeah, thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum to all. Just want to say thank you briefly. Just say thank you to Sister Fitra for having such a dynamic member of our community who has been around a long time and contributed so much to our thinking and our growth and development as a community. Thank you so much, Imam Mohammed Abdul Aleem, for everything that you have done and continue to do. My question is, you know, we see have experienced a lot of pushback, particularly with those who seem to think that Imam Mohammed, may Allah rest his soul, somehow concocted his own tafsir or put forth his own commentary. And we see a lot of pushback from other communities that just refuse to even think that we can engage in a fruitful exchange of ideas because of their rejection or their thoughts of him in such a negative manner. Do you think we'll ever be able to overcome that obstacle? Thank you.
Okay, yes. Well, first I'm going to say is to go back to the first lesson you learned with the leadership of Imam Muhammad was God is not a man. What that says is that you have the right by Allah's permission to think for yourself. That's if we stop looking to them to give us directional language, it won't be a problem. Our problem has been is that not enough of us have gone. I remember we went to the study. It was 7 brothers, and out of that 7, only 3 made it back. The others got cultural shock. This is in the 70s. All right. I think if our community, if we would follow and demonstrate what the Imam is teaching, you can't argue with the proof is in the pudding. If all we got is a lot of talking and quoting the Imam's name, they don't have to respect that. The respect is going to come when we begin to demonstrate independent schools, businesses, neighborhoods. We begin to live out, make the word flesh. Right now, look, let's be honest. Some of us, I'm talking about the leadership now, can barely say the prayers. Who's going to follow you? All right? They don't think we're serious. But I tell you what you got to keep in mind, though. All right? If you believe in Allah, right? If you believe in Allah, and the fact that we are Muslim at all is a miracle.
That's right.
Where we come from. See, we didn't get a American civil rights in 1965, and then we came to America in droves. We left the country that we were in, and now we're Muslims in America. But when you got here, the bedrock was already laid. We got to know our history to know that, and be comfortable with it, and be patient with it. 50 years compared to somebody who had Islam for 1,000 years. We should think about this. Where will we be at if we stick with and apply what Imam Muhammad gave in 50 years? That's what I want to know. I don't want to know. Look, if we had the same spirit of the pioneers, I say again, they knew no Quran, they knew no Hadith, they knew no Arabic, but they were workers. Now we can hardly get people to come out and sweep the floor.
Yes.
Anyway, let me stop.
Brother Imam, if Amatullah Umrani is on Study al-Islam, can you please raise your hand, Amatullah Umrani? Because Amatullah has I want her to answer that question because she was one of our first female ministers when the Imam transitioned us. And
I remember.
he recognized, but she answered that question. And if she's on the line, because she got a direct answer from Imam Mohammed.
Yes.
But okay, if she's there, we're gonna move on to the next question. Amatala Sabri, my dear friend from California, who's up very early this morning to hear you, Brother Imam Aleem. Amatala, take yourself off of mute and ask your question only.
First of all, I will say that the miracle is Imam Mohammed Abdul Aleem and others like him in our community.
That's right.
I did have 2 comments, but I'll respect your direction. I hope to make them in another time. Imam, I would like your suggestion on 2 things. Getting youth back into our community, where we see that in many instances you might have parents who were pioneers, and now their children look at them like they're crazy, you know, as far as how committed they were and still are. And then also any suggestions on the study methods we can use in really delving into the language environment of Imam Mohammed.
Well, as far as our youth, I believe that the best way to get the youth back is to demonstrate our true belief and support of what the Imam gave us, not lip service. Children like for you to keep it real. They hear us talking. I'm talking to us. Now, I'm not talking about the pioneers. I'm talking about those who came after them, where we have had the Imam's commentary and directional language for the last 50 years. And most masajids have not developed anything at all for the children. And how can you expect them to stay when we have not put an emphasis on? I'll give you, for example, when we have our function, how much of our functions, even like this function we have coming up on the 50th man, how much is focused on the youth? What type of programming we have, all right? How often do we have, say, programming where the youth can get up and speak? I mean, you got to involve them, all right? And once the children know, the young adults know that their opinions and their contributions are respected, they come around. I find that as I travel around those communities, those massages that have youth activities tend to have youth. Those who don't have no activities don't have no youth. Real simple. That's the first thing. The other thing is you gotta start having study groups. Don't wait for Jumas. That's what I said. Look. We studied this life of the Prophet last time. We only studied part of it. I think you got all these hadiths from study groups, right? And the people, I think they learned the Quran, study groups, all right? I say again, you know, back in 1975, one of the first books that the Imam suggested that we read was Muhammad, what was it? It was a little tiny book on the life of the Prophet. I can't think of the full name. And in other words, get used to study Prophet Muhammad, but study him as a working leader. All right. He wasn't just preaching.
Yeah.
You know, he was working. He demonstrated what it was to be a husband. He helped clean the house. He went shopping. He demonstrated what it was to be a teacher. You know, he would sit in the masjid and listen to the believers and answer questions. How do you think got these ideas from? It wasn't in the khutbah. It was having these interaction. The more you engage people in the work and let them know that their voice is being heard, the more you're going to grow. If they're not involved in the work, they don't feel they're not making a contribution.
And Brother Imam, and I'm glad you're saying that, because the format of Study al-Islam changed this year in 2025 to make Study al-Islam a study group, which is why right now we only have 4 people 4 of our scholars that are speaking every month because they're doing continuity in their presentations, just like you've been asked to do, so that we can really begin to connect the history, connect the information, and be able to use it in our everyday life. So I really appreciate you making that point, because I've gotten a few people who kind of complain, well, why aren't you doing more speakers? Because we're studying. That's
Right.
why we're studying.
Well, I tell you, but on that point, Sister Fitch, we also have people understand that in this day and time with the technology, everything costs. There's nothing we got to understand. There are no free lunches in America, and no place else in the world, by the way. We have to understand that the value. Don't be people who take something but don't appreciate it because you don't know the value. Well, one of the big problems I've seen as I travel around is that Muslims, the programs that bring good programming, sometimes the people, they love it, but they're not willing to support it.
And they don't.
That's a contradiction. That's a contradiction. If you really think something's valuable, if you gave $5 a week, I mean, look, I say again, if we want our youth, we want everybody, you got to involve them. And we got the technology to reach thousands.
Yes.
I mean, thousands, hundreds of thousands, but we need the resources. And we're not going to get it. See, let me tell you something. I get invited a lot of times to our brothers from overseas to their affairs. And they always want me to try to disclaim my heritage. No. I'm not one to do that. But I tell you what, one thing they will do, they will put their money where their mouth is.
That's right.
That's what we got to learn to do. We got the most powerful message. And inshallah, in the next time I come and show you how the different elements that brought us together. Sister mentioned miracle. Each and every one of us is a miracle. Those of us who, if whatever stage you came along in this process, if we stop to study this process, there's no way possible for you to be a Muslim today, and especially after having the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and then having the Imam, and then have all of us now who went through any part of that experience, you have an obligation now, because you know that there's no God but Allah. You know what you was doing before you became Muslim. You know what you was doing before you got married, and whatever caused you to change and be a part of this movement. That's miraculous.
And we're going to go on to the next question, but I'm going to tell you, when I lived in Jeddah, working in Jeddah for that period of time, the first question that I was asked by the Muslim women that I was working with is, can you be Muslim in America?
That's a miracle to them. It's a miracle to them.
They saw me. They used to say I was special, and I never understood what they meant. But what they really were saying to me, because they explained it to me when it was time for me to leave, that we didn't know you could be Muslim in America.
That's right.
And so, yes, let's go to the next question. And we're running out of time, but I do want to get everyone's questions in. Brother Bashir Assad, another iconic figure in our community, I am going to ask you to please just ask your question.
Assalamu alaikum.
My
question, Brother Imam, is could you point out the significance of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad? He made Umrah in the early 50s, and he was recognized by the Muslim leaders, particularly I remember Gamal Abdul Nasser recognized him, picked him up and hugged him and asked him would he stay there to teach his people. And he would build a school for him. So in context of what was happening in the history of that time and the significance of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and our movement of the Nation of Islam during that period of time.
Well, let me say this: that when you know his issue of Gamal Abdul Nasser and the Egyptian people, they were fighting for their liberation, and so you got to keep in mind that it goes back to what Reader's Digest said. Honorable Elijah Muhammad was the baddest black man in America.
Absolutely.
Right. Look, let me tell you something. Go back and look at the history. They said lynchers it's on GP. Now you telling him the people in America that they ain't the land of liberty and the home of the brave and all. You tell them to their face. Let me tell you something. I was in Saudi Arabia for Hajj one year. This was like 1980 something it was, and the Iranians had just had their revolution. I had to be 79, 80 years. And so they have these lecture periods. So we got up to talk, and the guy had just got up, one of the big ayatollahs. He was talking tough, this is where students of the Honorable Muhammad, who evolved to be students of Imam Muhammad, you be very respectful, but you say it very confidently. Look, you guys call America the devil from way over here. We stand right to his face. Because see, for us, we have nothing to lose now. They have done everything else they possibly can. The Honorable Muhammad represents what I'm going to talk about next time, a nexus. A nexus when all of the urges and needs within a people's soul come together and have an expression. He was the first to have that expression that, look, you can't do nothing else to me. So, and the Muslim over there, they welcome that. Remember, they were colonized. I forget that. There were no tough guys over in the Arab world. I'm telling you, I hope y'all understand what was going on.
They do, Brother Imam. But the more we talk about it, the more clearer it will become. And this is why we have to continue to talk about it. And
I definitely have to talk. I tell you, and see what is. Look, we have a saying. A football we always give is it. Who's your daddy? You heard that expression? Who's your daddy? And I said, well, I know who my daddy is. My dad's on Elijah Muhammad. That's why the Imam started saying, we just laugh. You know, you give him, you know, he always said he's the son of Elijah Muhammad. What is that saying? You want your children to be stronger in what you're doing and better than what you are.
absolutely.
And Honorable Elijah Muhammad, he took a bold move, right? So the rest of the Muslim world, those who recognize him, gave him the highest honor, not because of what he was teaching, but he was breaking the psychological barriers that kept the Muslims colonized.
That's right.
You gotta understand that, you know, and anytime you can break the barriers to make a Negro a black man, man, you have no idea the impact.
Yes. Brother Imam, we're going to take the next question. But I want to say that also I've heard some of the next generation under me, they think everything that they've experienced came from Imam Mohammed. And of course, I love Imam Mohammed. And but a lot of what Imam Mohammed inherited and did, like sending our young people over to Syria, that was under the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's leadership that those relationships were developed. Mm-hmm. And we don't know that in this community, which is why we have to talk more about it. Okay, Brother Yaqub, I'm going to ask you to ask a question only because we're beyond 11 o'clock and I want to get to our dear sister, Amatullah Amrani, who's going to close us out with the answer to the question of those who push back on us about Imam Muhammad's tafsir and his language. Yaqub, ask a question only, please.
Assalamu alaikum. When Imam Muhammad asked what happened to the Muslim world, and somebody said well, they left Islam or they left the Quran, and Imam Muhammad said no, they left Muhammad. What is he talking about?
That's right.
Well, so you can recite the Quran, but the Quran is a living book. It has to be demonstrated, right? And the one who demonstrated by his living, how he lived, you know, was Prophet Muhammad Islam. And if you don't know Prophet Muhammad Islam, a lot of things that he did and also what his father did are right in line with the Sunnah, but they may not call it that.
Yes.
But the more you study Prophet Muhammad Islam, you see that they were trying to imitate his example. So when people leave, give a good example. Prophet Muhammad never try to dictate people imitate Arab dress. Now you got people thinking that to be Muslim, you got to change your clothes and change this and that. That's not in the Sunnah. That's not in his history. All right. I say again, another book that I would recommend you read is it's called Strategies of the Prophet Muhammad. Why he did different things and how we should do those things. Like for instance, interfaith. The Prophet didn't go around to the pagans and stuff. No. He demonstrated the superiority of thought of Tawheed. If we have more of that, demonstrate what we have by having our own educational systems, and we're teaching the people how to be independent thinkers in light of the Quran, then you get them. But the Muslims left there. Ready now, I mean, I was over in was Abu Dhabi. They trying to be like the West now.
That's right. The students at my school in Jeddah, do you know that their hero was Kim Kardashian?
Yes. Oh man, look now. Saudi Arabia now is trying to become the new what is it? Las Vegas.
And they've in Mecca, they have built so many buildings taller than the Kaaba that when you now arrive in Mecca, the Kaaba looks like a little little miniature building. It doesn't even have the majestic feeling anymore. Anyway, Sister Mahasan, you are the last question. And then we're going to go to my dear friend Amatullah Amrani. Sister Mahasan, please just ask your question, no statements.
You are so sweet. I do love you. And I came on later. I missed some of the presentation. I simply want to ask the question about any comments he wanted to make about the progressions that are taking place in Africa. Now, if he did cover that, I'll go back and listen to it in the recording. But especially in the Burkina Faso area, inshallah. Go ahead.
So let me just say this, that this recording will be in the newsletter on Saturday. It will be there for 1 week. You can, for all of you who are receiving the newsletter every Saturday, it is there for you to listen to for 1 week. So the newsletter that came out on Saturday has last week's presentation. And then this Saturday will be Imam Aleem's presentation. For anyone who missed it today, you can hear it for 1 week, and then it goes to the archives. So, Brother Imam, I want to say about, I'm going to make this appeal right now because I hate asking for money. But we have 200 or more people on here. I want to first thank everyone who donates to Study Al-Islam. It is so important. You have no idea. Study Al-Islam is not a nonprofit. I have remained, I have kept my independence from any government oversight. And as a result, I don't benefit from, the program doesn't benefit from nonprofit. If you are not donating, please go to studyalislam.com and become a recurring donor. If it's $10 or $5 or $25 or $100, whatever you can give, please give. I can't tell you how expensive it is for me to keep Study Al-Islam going. Mm-hmm. But on that note, I'm going to, Brother Imam, I'm going to give you the last word, but I am going to ask Sister Amatullah Amrani to take herself off of mute. And Sister Amatullah, I know you have a wealth of knowledge, but I'm going to ask you to exercise some discipline and don't be like the imams who walk on water. I do want to say, Sister Imani had the honor of being named the first woman of religion in our community who was assigned that position by Imam Mohammed. And that was his introduction into recognizing the value of women leadership. Mm-hmm. And so, Sister Imani, this question has come up a couple of times, and you wrote me, Sister Imani, move your camera down just a little bit so people can see your face, and when they see you at the 50th, they can walk up and hug you as one of our pioneers. The question has come up on many occasions that our community has replaced Prophet Muhammad, prayers and peace be upon him, by Imam Mohammed. We know that that's not true, but we also know that we love Imam Mohammed, but he directed us to Prophet Muhammad as our universal leader. We know that, and we're past the point of allowing people to shame us into being what they want us to be, or their definition of a good Muslim. We've passed that. But you did send me an answer that Imam Mohammed shared with you. Would you be so kind to elaborate on that?
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Yes, we were addressing how we use Imam's teachings, his instructions, his examples, and I had just said that Imam had told us that he wants us to respect him as the leader, but he wants us, I should say and, not but, and he wants us to use our own areas of knowledge or study, and in order to help also to advance the religion. He said that we didn't have to say Imam W.D. Muhammad says this in every sentence. He wants us to study what he says and to incorporate it in our own lives and thinking, and then also use it for the particular audience or the particular persons that we are interacting with. So those, I guess that would be a summary of. Did that reach the point that you were?
Yes, but I do want to add one point that you added. It's sometimes hard when you know that the information that you're getting ready to share is beyond your scope of knowledge. And so you don't have a choice but to say, Imam Muhammad told us this, or Imam Muhammad told us that, or taught us that, or so yes, Sister Amrani, I really appreciate that, because I've heard from other Imams. Imam Muhammad said to us, we should not push his name down the throats of other people. And as Imam Abdul Aleem just expressed, we should exemplify it in our behavior and in our conduct.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, there's a real important point that you just said, that we also, though, should not be ashamed or timid about uplifting the name of the leader and the teachings of the leader. And yes, if it's something that he said, yes, be happy to say that this came from our leader. Yes, and be thankful to Allah that we were blessed to get these things directly from him. So it's kind of a balancing, but no, we always want to put the leader first, but he just, advised us to, sometimes you can turn people off. And if it's something that can be considered to be common knowledge, then just say it as a fact. And with your own confidence. And
Thank
then, sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sister Matala. Imam Abdul Aleem, I want to thank you. I want to let the audience know, the community know, that they should be, I would hope that they would invite their young people to these study groups that we're having on Study al-Islam, because no one person can, you can't remember all of this information, and having you here is such an honor and a privilege that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has preserved you and your memory. And so I do want everyone to know that this is just part one of your study on the history and the transition and all of the all that came with that, the struggle, the rush to try to be a good Muslim. What did it mean to be a good Muslim? What did it look like? And where was we going to get those examples from? And so Dr. Aleem, Imam Aleem, please, you have the last thought before we close in prayer.
Okay, well, Bismillah, man. Two things I would just want to focus in on is that, one, those of us who are sincere students of Imam W. Muhammad, is that we continue to be examples. Let's not just talk the talk, let's walk the walk.
That's right.
And secondly, pass on what you have gotten to those coming behind you, because the Prophet said, he says that teach those who are not here, tell those who are not here that perchance those who are not here may understand it better than those who are here. And in the history, I just want to say this, one last thing. In the history, we know that once the Prophet, present peace be upon him, once he passed, the people had to now understand what he has said and live it. That's our challenge today. And let us pass on to the young people the best of what we understood. And remember, there's no God but Allah. And there's no individual opinion where we're gonna, no, Allah gonna judge you. What are your works? That's all I want to say.
Thank you. I want to say thank you. I do want to say again to everyone, please visit studyalislam.com, the website, and please donate and become a recurring donor, no matter what the amount is. It will be helpful to continue this program and make it available to you. I'm working on the programming for 2026. I ask Allah to preserve me. I ask Allah to preserve our community. And for those who have transitioned, and we know that we are all going to, ask Allah that He forgive them their sins and let them enter paradise. Please don't forget that next week, Imam Fahim will be here. He will continue the study on Imam's tafsir, his methodology in approaching the study of the Quran, how he connected concepts. And it is very important to understand that, because it is a tool to free you on how you can approach the Quran and how you can read hadiths and realize whether they're authentic or not. You feel it in your spirit. So with that said, Brother Imam, please give your wife our warm regards. We really appreciate you. We make dua for your safety and the safety of all of your loved ones, the community. And inshallah, we will see you in Philadelphia. And thank you personally. With that, Brother Imam Omar, can you please close us in prayer?
ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. Oh Lord, let not our hearts deviate now that you've guided us, but grant us mercy from you. For you're the grantees of bounties unmeasured. Ameen.
Ameen. And we want to always thank Imam Omar for being with us. Brother Imam Omar, we will never take you for granted. We are so grateful that you are here every week to open us and close us in prayer. With that said, I'm gonna stay on the line because I've invited Imam Abdul from Ghana to meet with me. And so if I can just ask everyone else, Brother Imam Aleem, don't go anywhere. I want you to just meet Imam Abdul. He is the Imam over the second largest masjid in Africa. And he is going to be a guest on Study Al-Islam. And we're trying to really connect more with our brothers and sisters in Africa in order to understand some of those natural traditions outside of the religion that they practice that we want to entertain, because we know that our cultural richness is important. It is important, and those connected. So to everybody, I want to say assalamu alaikum. If you don't mind, please see you next week.